Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we decode the financial statements of public companies and let you know what is really going on behind the scenes. Today we've got something interesting from Enveric Biosciences Incorporated in AVB, a company that seems to be making some quite complex moves with its warrants. So what is the big story here? Well, Enveric Biosciences Incorporated is doing a bit of a financial maneuver. We're talking about something called warrant exercises and the issuance of new warrants. Essentially, they're asking some investors who already hold warrants to exercise them now by giving them a sweet deal, and in return they're getting some cash and issuing more warrants. It is like a financial Swiss Army knife they're trying to use to get money and adjust their capital structure. This is all happening through what is called a Form 8, which is basically a report filed with the US Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, whenever a company has something really important to announce. Think big news that investors need to know about right away. The core of this filing revolves around a material definitive agreement. That is fancy talk for a really important contract. In this case, Enveric Biosciences Incorporated entered into warrant exercise inducement offer letters. Basically, they send out feelers to certain investors to get them to exercise their existing warrants. Here is where it gets interesting. These investors held warrants to buy shares of Enveric Biosciences Incorporated stock at prices like $36 or $10.98 per S-share, but Enveric Biosciences Incorporated offered them a deal, a reduced exercise price of just $7.05. Because they're also giving these investors new warrants in exchange for this exercise. It is a trade-off away to get cash now, and also create more potential future dilution or capital generation. So what did Enveric Biosciences Incorporated get out of this? They raked in about $3.1 million in gross proceeds from these warrant exercises. That is a decent chunk of change, but of course there are always fees and expenses to consider. To help facilitate this deal, Enveric Biosciences Incorporated brought in H.C. Wainwright and Company Incorporated, the placement agent. They're essentially the brokers for this private offering. And what do the placement agents get for their trouble? They get a commission, a 7% cash fee on the money raised, and another 1% management fee. So out of that $3.1 million, a good chunk will be going to them. They'll also get reimbursed for expenses, which can add up. But wait, there is more. Enveric Biosciences Incorporated is also giving the placement agent warrants to buy its stock. These are called placement agent warrants, and they represent another potential dilution down the road. It is a common practice in these types of deals. The deal officially closed on the 12th of December of this year. So this is all very recent news. And what will they do with the money? Standard stuff, product development, working capital, and general corporate purposes. These are all necessary but also quite vague terms that can mean almost anything. Now let's talk about these new warrants, the ones Enveric Biosciences Incorporated is issuing. They're called Series E and Series F warrants, and the company has to file a registration statement for these new shares that could be issued from these warrants. This is to make sure everything is above board with the SEC. The exercise price for these new warrants is set at $7.05. Interestingly, this is the same price at which the existing warrants were exercised. There is a difference in expiration dates between the two types of new warrants. The Series E warrants are good for 5 years after the registration statement is effective. The Series F warrants are shorter term, expiring 18 months after that registration. This gives different timelines for potential future stock issuance. A really important detail here is that these new warrants come with ownership limits. An investor can't exercise them if it would push their ownership stake above 4.99% of the company's stock without giving the company advance. Notice to potentially increase that limit up to 9.99%. This is a common way for companies to try and prevent any single investor from gaining too much control too quickly. There is also a provision for cashless exercise. This means if the shares aren't registered and ready to be issued immediately, investors might be able to exercise their warrants without paying cash by simply receiving a net number of shares based on a formula. This avoids immediate cash outlay for the investor, but still results in dilution for the company. The warrants also have clauses about what happens in case of a fundamental transaction. Think of major events like a merger or a big asset sale. In these situations, the warrant holders have rights to receive shares in the new company or alternative consideration. This is to protect their investment in case the company is bought or its structure changes dramatically. And in certain situations related to these fundamental transactions, warrant holders can even choose to redeem their warrants for cash based on a valuation called the Black-Scholes value. This is a complex option pricing model that essentially puts a theoretical value on the warrant. Now, for a sobering piece of information, there is no established trading market for these new warrants, and the company doesn't expect one to develop. This means liquidity for these warrants will be extremely limited. Investors holding them likely can't just sell them on an exchange easily. It is also crucial to understand that holding a warrant doesn't make you a shareholder. You don't get voting rights or the typical privileges of a shareholder until you actually exercise that warrant and become an owner of the company's stock. This section discusses unregistered sales of equity securities. Basically, Enveric Biosciences Incorporated has issued these new warrants and placement agent warrants without registering them with the SEC, under specific exemptions like Section C of FI or Rule Lineal B of Regulation D. This is common for private placements of securities. They also plan to issue shares from these warrants under similar exemptions or under Section 10, AGO of the Securities Act, which pertains to exchange of securities by the issuer. The company also put out press releases on the 11th of December and 12th to announce these transactions. These are often crafted to put a positive spin on things. Finally, we have the signatures. Joseph Tucker, the Chief Executive Officer, has signed off on this report. This confirms the company is formally reporting these events. So what is the big picture here? Enveric Biosciences Incorporated looks to be in a bit of a bind, needing cash and using a complex series of warrant transactions to get it. They're offering incentives for existing warrant holders to exercise, and in return they're issuing more warrants. This brings in cash now, but also creates more potential for future dilution, which can decrease the value of existing shares. The fact that these new warrants don't have a trading market suggests they are being issued to a specific set of investors, probably those who are more sophisticated or have a strategic interest in the company rather than the general public. The company is essentially trying to manage its finances by trading future potential dilution for immediate cash needs. It is a strategy that can work, but it carries risks. One key risk is that if the company's stock price doesn't perform well, these new warrants might expire worthless, or if the stock price soars, the dilution could be significant. We'll have to keep an eye on how these funds are used for product development and general corporate purposes, because that is where the real success or failure will be determined. Alright, that is our breakdown of Enveric Biosciences Incorporated's recent filing. What is your take on these warrant maneuvers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.